Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Utterly Unscripted. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Cali Estes. Hi, Dr. Cali. How are you today?
I am swell. How are you?
Really so excited to have you here finally. I think this is third time lucky now, which seems to be happening a lot lately.
No worries. I roll with whatever. So I am glad to be here and thank you for the invite.
I'm really pleased to have you here. You have quite a story. You've got a lot of credits to your name. You have been called the female Dr. Drew, which actually was one point I said to you right before we started recording that I don't take notes, but that was one thing I wanted to write down and bring up with you because I I always feel uncomfortable when someone is compared to somebody else, and I'm not sure how you feel about it because it seems like all of the media stuff that I've been watching about you says she's the female Dr. Drew, but you're Dr. Cali Estes. So how do you feel about that?
So they did that to me on the red carpet, and I had no idea they were going to say that. So I was caught off
Ah,
guard. There's a clip of me going, okay, like I didn't know what to say because I never had heard that before. And then afterward, I started asking, what did they mean? And it was that I'm very outspoken. I'm very, in your face. My ideas are very
yeah.
unconventional. And, people will come at me and I'm just kind of like, no, this is how it is. And that's what I think. So that's where it came from, as opposed to, oh, I guess she's trying to get famous or whatever. It was more like, wow, she's been doing this a long time and really has that kind of in your face mentality, which is
Yeah.
similar to the way he is.
I guess then it's not such a bad thing. It's not such a bad thing to be compared to him. There's nothing wrong with Dr. Drew. He's been around for a really long time. And of course, everybody would know if you don't know who he is, then where have you been? But I guess then if that's the way that people are referring to you, I think it's a good thing. Would you tell us just a little? I'm pretty sure that anybody listening probably knows who you are and has seen you around because you've been everywhere. But would you just quickly let us know who you are, what you're doing, and why are we talking to you?
So my name is Cali Estes, and I'm known as a celebrity addictions coach. So I specialize in drugs, alcohol, porn addiction, food addiction, any vice you have that you can't tackle in a very non-conventional way. So I
Hmm.
have a signature program called Sober on Demand that I bring to the client. So you will see executives and celebrities that don't want to go to an inpatient treatment center for 30 days and hang out and go from group to group. So I bring that whole team to them and I
Mm,
do in 3 to 15 days what a treatment center fails to do in 30. So it's a
okay.
very different concept, controversial a little bit, but that's what I do. And then I also have the largest online educational school for people that want to learn how to be an addictions coach, recovery coach, a counselor, a sober companion, an interventionist, how to become and do what I'm doing. Because I'm one
Mm,
person, I can't help everybody. So I started training people to help me help them because I'm one person and there's tons of people that need help.
absolutely. And I see there's a website behind you. Is that what you're referring to?
I was teaching today. Yeah,
Oh,
so that's I forgot to take that down. The addictionsacademy.com, I was teaching the entire state of Nebraska counselors in opiate use disorder, which is like one of the newer terms in the DSM. What does it mean? What are the criteria? So I put that up there so that they can find me when they have
oh,
questions.
oh. Well, it might be helpful to somebody, I guess. What is your experience? You wrote a book. Um, well, you've written a couple of books. In particular, the one that was pitched to me was "I Married a Junkie."
Yeah.
And I've seen a few of the interviews with you on KTLA and around the place. I I haven't got any notes, so I looked at about three different ones. You literally married a junkie, but you didn't see the signs, and this is really common. I myself have personal experience with this.
Yeah, so when I met my husband, he would drink a little, do a little cocaine, but it was never out of control. And I
Yeah.
started building my private practice, and I had no idea he was taking oxys and roxys, which led to heroin, which led to fentanyl, which led to multiple overdoses, multiple car crashes, and a carjacking. And I didn't
Wow.
see it because in the beginning you could hide it really, really well because the money is there for it in the beginning. Your tolerance isn't as high as it is. When your tolerance hits that level, obviously the money goes up, you can't sustain it, you can't stay awake while you're driving, and things start to happen. And then it became, now what do I do? Now I've got this husband who's on a tear, who's not going to go inpatient. So we're doing everything we can. We tried marijuana, we tried Suboxone, we tried methadone. I would just take him with me. I'm like, you know what? You're going to go with me while I travel, because what else am I going to do with you? So it just got so exhausting. But this is the story of like the first part of it. We've got another book coming out called I Married a Junkie, The Aftermath. It's like, what happens after? Because everyone's going, well, now what? What happened after? I'm like, well, we better put it in a book. So we have another book coming out, but that's like what happened to that point, how I dealt with it, and what we did.
Everybody wants a part two.
I know. Like,
when you talk about Suboxone, you talk about methadone, things like that. That is the point that I came into my partner's story, was when they got onto methadone. And I have a real problem with it, because I feel as though the doctors replaced one addiction with another addiction, because 7 years later they're still not recovered from they literally have just replaced another addiction, except this addiction is sanctioned. It's okay. It's subsidized by the government, and I don't know what it's like in the US, but here in Australia they pay $5 a day.
so we have a grant program where you can go for free, and each center was awarded basically $1 million. So each methadone center would allow so many people to come, and it's a lot of homeless, it's a lot of indigent people in line. And the problem with methadone, because I do agree with you, is that you can take methadone and you can also do heroin at the same time. So you can do both. And then you have somebody who goes, well, I don't want to go to the clinic today, so I'm going to do heroin for the next 2 days, because you get a 3-day window. I'll go on the 3rd day so I don't get sick. Now they're doing methadone and heroin, and the government is paying for it.
Yeah.
So I think it should be used as a step down. So if you want to get off of the heroin and the opiates, we're going to use it for a very short period, step you down, and then make you go sober.
Yeah, I agree. And I should probably just caveat that my partner was not on heroin. He actually was addicted to opiates, so the oxys and things like that, after a car accident. So the doctor that he had been seeing put him onto this program of oxycodone, I think it is, or OxyContin, something like that. I'm one of these people who I rarely take a paracetamol, so I'm not entirely up on it. And this was my first exposure, really, to any of this stuff. Was I found it by accident in a shopping bag, like in a grocery bag, and then I asked questions about it, and then the lies started. Oh no, that's not mine, it's somebody else's. And well, your name is on it, so why do you have it if it's somebody else's? And eventually it all came out. It took a while, but it all came out. But as I said, 7 years later, there's no improvement. They do the step down thing. Sorry.
No, that's the problem. We call that like the doctor shuffle, where you come in because you had a back problem, a legitimate back problem, and you have legitimate pain, and you're put on pain medication. And I guarantee you that doctor didn't tell your partner, this pain medication is highly addictive. Within 3 days, you're going to be physically and mentally dependent on this. So he or she didn't know that. Then when it's time to come off, guess what? We're not going to tell you about the detox. It's diarrhea, it's vomiting, it's leg cramps, it's anhedonia, which is flat affect. So that person panics. Oh my God, I got to go through that? Yeah. Well, we're going to give you methadone, so you won't. Okay, great. But now we're supposed to titrate you down so you have less symptoms to the point where you come off. And that kind of comes to a screeching halt when these methadone clinics go, oh, we have this grant, but if this person doesn't come, we don't get paid. So the way to get paid is that person has to keep coming back every single day. So every time your partner goes there, they go, we got our money today.
Yeah, that's right. They do. Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's where they get stuck. Yeah. And they pitch it like this is a good thing. It's like, well, it's a good thing for a short window, but we're not doing the rest of the work to it now. We have to add that to it.
Yeah, and definitely it's a good thing, but not for 7 years. And there have been issues where the pharmacies have screwed up the dosage, and so he's gotten too much. In fact, it was a prolonged period where he didn't even know that he was getting too much. He's probably going to kill me for even talking about this, but I I had to support him through that, and they would never admit it. They get audited every month, and they have to say what they've got, but they don't have to tell the patient that they've done the wrong thing, because that would open them up to litigation. It would open them up to so many different issues. But in the meantime, then, so he was on like 25 milligrams of methadone, and she was dosing him 90 plus per day for like
Wow.
5 days at a time. And then when she realized and took it all away again, he went
He
straight
went
into
through.
withdrawals. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm
So
sure
all
you
that
noticed
stuff you
it.
said, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you noticed the increase because he was a little bit more sleepy, a little bit more loopy. You're talking
Yeah.
to him and he's going, "What?" And he repeats the question an hour later and you're going, "What's going on with you?" You're
Yeah.
noticing something's wrong, but you don't know what it is, and you wouldn't expect a medical professional to be wrong.
Yeah.
I actually had that happen with my husband. They kept increasing him instead of decreasing him.
Oh
And
wow.
we have something here called duty to warn. And because I'm in the industry, I just made a phone call and I said, I'm going to report you to the medical board for misdosing your patients. You have a
Mm,
patient that's at 70 milligrams that's supposed to be titrating down and you're titrating up. Well, sure
mm.
enough, he came home the next day and he was livid. He says, I don't know what's going on. They took me down to 30 milligrams. And I'm like, I don't
Oops.
know. I have no idea what happened. No clue.
No,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So he was
I
mad. And I'm just like,
yeah, I feel bad. I do. I Since being with him, I have a newfound empathy for the people who are on the program, because they are treated like shit. I mean, here in Australia, it is really such an issue, and they're made to wait outside in a line, and it could be raining and they're still made to stand outside in the line, and they're not allowed to come inside the doors. And oh well, the pharmacist is 40 minutes late, you're all hanging at the door, and that is exactly what they call it hanging, because it's 24 hours that they go back every 24 hours to get their dose, kind of thing. And the medical professionals know it. And like you said, you could make a phone call. I did the same thing when we found out that she had been overdosing him. Made a phone call, wrote a letter, an official complaint to the Australian Health Practitioners Registration Association. I used to work for them. So I knew the process of making the complaint, but you know what? It went nowhere. And the reason it went nowhere is because of this stigma that is attached to people who are trying to do the right thing for themselves and recover. And that's what it's all about. It's not about getting another fix or a cheap fix or anything like that, because I can't see why anybody would want to continue being on that program. It doesn't encourage you to be on it at all.
no. And we have the same problem. They stand in line and they have to check in and then they get a number and then they go in on their number. And the counselors in there, and this is where I started my career, going way back in the 90s in Kensington, Philadelphia with the methadone clinic, is the counselors are overworked. And it's a
Mm,
numbers game. I don't have time to see all those people in an 8-hour day. So when they come in, it's a check the box. Okay, do
yeah.
you have any symptoms? No. Okay, ask you 5 or 6 questions. Check, check, check. There's your session. Have a nice day. Off you go. So you're not really getting therapy. They call it counseling, but it by no means is counseling. It's a check the box
Mm-mm.
so they get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're really not doing them a service. We're doing them a disservice and calling it, a program.
Is that what encouraged you to create the program that you have now?
So I was working for a treatment center and I've been in business, private practice 10 years. And I'm in this treatment center and I'm noticing I see the same clients every 60 days. And the better insurance they had, the more I see them. And I noticed we weren't doing them any good. They're getting 1 hour of therapy a week, and it's not even that. So the first session they get with me is paperwork. The second session they get with me is goal setting, which is paperwork. The third session is what are we going to do aftercare? And the fourth session is wrap up. They're not getting therapy and they keep coming back. And I thought, this is stupid. This has a 95% fail rate. I can do better. So I quit and I went into private practice and I started seeing clients one on one. And I started studying other stuff, life coaching, NLP, little motivational interviewing. I started getting really, really well rounded. And I started throwing everything I had in the client one on one, and it started to work. And I thought, if I could do this intensive, how would it go? Let's try it. So I took a couple clients and just tried it. And I stepped back and went, wow, this is really something. Because you're getting me for 5 hours a day for 3 days. We are deep diving into every issue you have in every area of your life. We're using the Myers-Briggs, we're using the Enneagram. And when you leave, you have a blueprint now of what you want to do career, where you're going to go in relationship, what you're doing with your health. Everything is covered. So I started to see success. And I started to see people get sober and go, not only am I sober, I started a company, or I wrote a book, or I did my bucket list. And it started to get exciting. And I'm like, this is something. So then I created Sober on Demand. And I got called out to LA with a private client, famous client. And it kind of snowballed from there. People started to see results and said, we want to work with you.
That's good. I like the idea because, these people actually, I would say that from the people that I've met when I have been taking my partner to the line, as we call it. Oh, actually, sorry. My plug fell out of the laptop and I just saw the battery going. Sorry, everyone. When I've taken them to the line, and you talk to people, they're good people. Not everybody who's going there, and that's where the stigma. The government has been responsible for that. 99%, the government is responsible for the stigma that is attached to people that are trying to recover and get themselves clean. Not everybody wants to, and I get that there are the odd people, but if there are 10 people in the line, it's one person who's just going to get a fix. The rest of them are actually, you talk to them and they're trying to do something with their lives. I met an 82-year-old woman who was on methadone, and they had kept her on methadone for 44 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Why? Why did they have to keep her on the program for that long? Exactly. It's money, because she pays $5 or $6 to the pharmacy every day, but the government is paying $30, $40, $50 every day as part of the subsidy. And they're full. The pharmacy doesn't have room for anybody new coming onto the program. Of course not, because they've got an 82-year-old woman who's been on the program for 44 years. She's fine. She's doing good. But she has said before she doesn't need to be on it, but no one will take her off of it. I find that sad in a way. And that's where I don't know how to feel. Do I feel sympathy for these people? Because there's nothing I can do. I mean, you and I can talk about this till we're blue in the face, and I don't think it's going to change legislation. I don't think that it's going to change the way that the people are seen, because the medical board ignores anything that comes from a methadone or Suboxone patient. Here in Australia, Suboxone is only given to someone who is stabilized on their recovery program, and usually it's people who are in jail. So they don't prescribe Suboxone to someone like my partner.
Ours is the opposite.
Oh, okay.
So the homeless, indigent usually do methadone, whereas the person who has money, because Suboxone isn't covered by insurance, the actual doctor visit, they will get a Suboxone doctor. So it's $1,000 a month for Suboxone maintenance. So you're going to get your executives, you're going to get your CEOs, your celebrities that don't want to go to the clinic, but your average person, who's making $800 a week, they can't afford that. So they're going to go to the methadone clinic and pay their $10 or $14 copay and get the subsidy. So it's kind of very divided like that.
So we have the same, we do seem to have the same thing here. And there's no incentive for although I did talk to the doctor, the methadone doctor, who said that he is actually treated quite badly. Do you find that in the industry, that as a recovery doctor or someone who is an addiction doctor, there's like a stigma also attached to you for helping people? What the hell is that about?
So when I was on the Dr. Drew show, we had this discussion. we discussed what does sobriety mean. And this is going back, I think I was on the show 2016, and Dr. Drew was anti marijuana at that point, and I was pro marijuana. So it was kind of like a very interesting debate. But we talked about this, and the question is, what does sober mean? So you have AA and NA that says you can take no mind altering substance at all. So Suboxone, methadone, and Vivitrol, you're getting high. So you can't be part of our sober group because you're not sober. So that trickles down to, well, if I'm using methadone, I can't go to a meeting because technically I'm not sober. So these people have no support. So that's a big problem. I think now we have a meeting for those people, the MET group, but we didn't at the time. And it was very controversial. It's like, well, are we really providing a service with long-term Suboxone and methadone use if we don't have support system? There's no support. So where do they go? They go to the methadone clinic and stand in line and talk about how miserable they are standing in line. That is their whole support. You know, they're not getting therapy, they're not getting counseling. So what are we really doing? And we talked about that. And that's, I think, the problem, because people then sit back and go, well, you're not sober. You're not in therapy. You're really not, you're not in AA or NA. So what are you doing for your sobriety? Standing in line in a methadone clinic isn't sobriety. And then it becomes, well, you're just getting your fix. Instead of saying we should have mandatory therapy, there should be a step down program. There should be a doctor that says, okay, now we're going to put you on 25 milligrams, but next month I'm dropping you to 20 and we'll maintain. And then I'm going to drop you to 15 and then 10 and then 5 and then 0. No one's doing that. And that's the problem, I think.
The doctors also have the issue where they have to stabilize their patient. It's not, and that's, I think, a misconception, because I had that misconception that, oh, well, you've been on it for so long, why are you not dropping off of it? And there is that period of time that they need to stabilize and they need to get better. But the doctors are not doing that. I've already told the doctor that he's not doing the right thing by encouraging him to go up in dosage instead of stabilizing on what he is. There's also an issue where the government is not providing, especially now since all the shutdowns, the one rehab clinic, the publicly funded rehab clinic that we have in this whole state. So a state with 2.2 million people was closed down and used as a homeless shelter. I'm not saying that that shouldn't have happened, but there are empty houses that should have been used for homeless shelter, people who were unhoused, instead of closing a government-funded rehab facility, and it's got no plans of reopening. They don't plan on reopening it. So unless you have $30,000 to pay for the private rehab clinic, the doctors have nowhere to send you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another issue.
Ours isn't that bad, but it's close. Right before COVID, I'm in Florida. So we have 2 publicly funded, not the best treatment centers on the planet, but they were here. So if you didn't have insurance or you didn't have enough money, you could be referred there. It was free. Both of those shut down before COVID. So we don't have any more government funded anything. You want to go to a private rehab, the base is 12,000, and that goes all the way up to 120,000, depending on, if you want a mountain view or an ocean view and a butler and a whatnot. But we don't have, it's all we have. So if you don't have the money, the question becomes, what do I do? Where do I go? So one thing I started doing was online coaching, telehealth, getting people, something affordable where I can see you, you can see me. Maybe you're not in a treatment setting, but we're talking a couple times a week and you're going to a meeting or you have a support group. At least you're connected to something, me and a text message, and I'm all over the globe doing that. So I do have clients all around the world that took me up on that offer because they didn't have access to an actual treatment center. And we're walking through the process.
Yeah, it's just not available. And I think that probably is shameful, more shameful than the fact that they're leaving unhoused people out on the street. Before we move on, I just quickly, there was something that you mentioned, and I just thought of a question. People may not understand about recovery from these types of addictions, particularly the methadone, heroin, cocaine, that type of thing. It isn't just a matter of saying you need to go into recovery. It's actually quite a process for the person involved, and it's not easy, and it's quite painful, isn't it? It's not, you can't just detox and go, "Oh, I'm detoxing," and it's all flowers and wonderful, which I think is a misconception in the public.
It is. Let me ask you a question. Is your podcast video and audio or just audio?
It depends.
Okay, so I'm going to show you this. So if your
Okay.
listeners can see the video, and I'm going to explain it to you. So your brain, if you put your two hands up and open them up like you're going to catch a ball in front of your face, right? And this is the two sides of your brain. They fire, they open and close. So if you open and close your hands, it's like firing. So this is what your brain does when you think, right?
Yeah.
You're driving down the street and you get pissed off, they fire real fast, right? Because you're irritated. They cut me off. How dare they cut me off? They go back to normal. So when you do uppers, speed, cocaine, methamphetamine, they speed up as if you got cut off on the highway. And then they go back to normal. There's no physical detox. It's just your brain. When you do alcohol, marijuana, and Xanax, your hands slow down. So opening and closing, but slowly, right? If you've ever talked to somebody who's had 5 or 6 drinks, you know what I mean. They don't make any sense. They're slurring. It makes no sense. But then their brain goes back to normal after about 5 days. Their body calms down. They feel better. When someone does opiates, if you took your hands and closed and made 2 fists, this is what happens to their brain. So the neurotransmitters do not fire, and the opiates flood the center of the brain 1,000 times more powerful than any brain juice you have. What happens then is you take that away. So after 3 days, they're physically addicted. The brain is shut down and said, hey, I don't want to work. I'm just going to hang
this.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. But then when you take the substance away, the brain has to refire. So on day 1, if your hands are closed, it doesn't open. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 20, day 30, day 45, it takes 6 months for your brain to start to want to fire. That's why methadone and Suboxone work, because it's an instant refire. Once you get through precipitated withdrawal, bam, there you are. That's why they work. The problem is now we want to slowly remove that to let your brain to start to refire itself. And that's where we're going wrong. So theoretically, that physical hold is unlike any drug on the market. It is not just mental, it's physical. So now when you detox, you've got the diarrhea, the leg cramps, the vomiting, the insomnia, the nausea, all that. Once you get past that acute withdrawal, you now have post-acute withdrawal. And post-acute withdrawal is you feel completely dead in the head. It's called anhedonia. I just feel sad. I don't feel happy. Music doesn't make me happy. Sex doesn't make me happy. Gambling doesn't make me happy. Oh, look, I won the lottery. I'm not happy. Nothing makes your brain fire except for an opiate. So that's why people get hooked so fast on methadone and Suboxone. It makes your brain turn. But the idea being slowly back you down and let the brain refire itself. That's the piece we're missing.
Yeah. And they tend to panic when they're off of it. Like when they're coming down, they panic about what's going to happen. Oh my God, I don't want to vomit. I don't want to shit myself. And these are real conversations that people are having that, unless you've been there, you've got no idea. And I've not been on methadone. I've not been on the Suboxone program. All I see is what happens to someone who is, and I see the panic in their eyes. So I guess now that you've explained that with your, and if that's what is happening, oh my gosh, like it's no wonder they don't want to do anything.
And think of it this way. Have you ever had food poisoning?
I have.
Okay, you know that feeling right when you realize you've had food poisoning and you're gonna vomit?
Yeah.
That's the feeling they're stuck in. They know it's coming. They don't know when. They don't know how bad it's gonna be, but it's coming. And then, with food poisoning, you vomit, you have diarrhea, and then you're like, oh, I feel so much better. And then you go, uh-oh, this is going to happen again. Right. Yeah. How long am I going to be here? And sometimes it's short and fast, and sometimes, it might be hours. That's the detox. And then not knowing how long this is going to last. So that's it. And just knowing if I just do a little oxy or a little roxy or a little heroin, it just stops all that and I feel better.
Yeah. It's easy, isn't it?
Very.
Because it's easier to do that than to be off of the stuff. Can I ask you one more question, actually? Because this
Yeah.
came up once before, in particular with him, um, where the doctor told him that when he was feeling that way, he couldn't possibly be feeling that way. It doesn't work like that. He knew that he had been it's happened both ways, under and overdosed. So when that has happened, he feels it, he gets the sweats and starts to go into that withdrawal mode. And the doctor laughed it off and said, "No, it's all in your head. You couldn't possibly feel it." But do they feel it?
Yes. Oh, yes. As
Yeah.
soon as they start to sweat, the detox has started. As soon as the
Yeah.
sweat starts, that's how you know. So what you have is a doctor who's never been on methadone or Suboxone, never been on opiates, has absolutely no clue what they're prescribing. They're so out of touch with reality. They just know what they read on a pamphlet in the 6-hour course they took to get certified to dispense the medication.
Right.
So I deal with these guys for a living. I see them starting to detox. I see the sweating. I see them laying on the floor going, "Oh my God, I'm going to die." And I'm going, "You're not
Yeah.
going to die, but you're going to feel really bad for the next. I mean, you're going to think you're dying for 4 days. I know it's coming. You
Yeah.
know it's coming." So we have two options. We can let you go through it, or we can give you something to make you comfortable.
And would you say that what's the better thing to do then?
So I asked them, "Do you want to get on Suboxone or methadone? Because if you don't, I have a doctor that does comfort meds. So it's clonidine, Vicodin, and I think trazodone are the three.
Oh,
And he,
wow.
he uses the comfort meds instead of Suboxone and methadone. You don't get sick. You don't have the withdrawals. You basically sleep through that period, a couple days. You're still going to feel a little death warmed over, but you're not going to have all the symptomology." So I have clients that go, "You know what? I'll do that because I don't want to get caught
Yeah.
up in the Suboxone methadone."
That's interesting. They don't prescribe any of that here in Australia. If the doctor says go to the hospital, they basically have said before that the only thing they'll be able to do is treat the symptoms. So give the anti nausea pills and things like that. But that's all that they will do, um, which I guess discourages people from seeking out help. And we've talked about it again. There's no encouragement for them to get off of any of these programs. And like you said,
Yeah.
it all just comes back to money, which is a real shame. It's a shame
And
that
I
people are
think
going through this and we're not dealing with it.
here, if you go to the ER, they won't even see you.
No.
They call it clogging up the ER. So
Yeah.
it's like you come in and, "Oh, you're in detox. No, thank you. Off you go.
Yeah.
You're
And
not going to
especially through
die."
COVID, they wouldn't let you come in at all. They
Yeah.
would make you wait outside, and there was a person like a triage nurse, I guess. I used to call them concierge because they wouldn't do anything. So they would just be, and actually they weren't even concierge because a concierge at least is useful. But these people would just make you stand in the line and then say, "Oh well, like you said, you're not dying. You didn't come here by ambulance, and don't go by ambulance because they won't come and see you anyway."
That we had that too, and that reminded me of, have you ever gone to the drive-through a fast food
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A and they're like, "Hi, let me take your order," and they can't help you. They don't take your money. They just take your order and shush you down the line, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah.
that's useful."
Next
So
window.
yeah, same
Yeah.
exact concept. It's like, let's keep them from, arguing and fighting and whatnot, but we're really not giving them any services. And that's
No.
a big problem. There's not enough services for the issues that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even see how that is a problem that can be, at least not in the short term. I know that it's been talked about a lot, especially here. I'm only familiar with it here in Australia because I did some research and I wanted to know more. I wanted to be a little bit more informed about what was happening. I used to work for the medical board in a previous life, and I was dealing with complaints from patients. And so I knew the process, but again, I also knew that a methadone patient or somebody on those programs is going to be ignored because there is that stigma attached and there's just zero support for
Yeah.
people. So I applaud you. This program sounds great and we need more of that. It needs to be It needs to be something that people talk about more, for sure.
Yeah.
I like
Well,
that.
we're slowly getting there. Slowly.
Yeah, slowly, slowly. Like I said, they've been talking about it here. The government have been talking about increasing subsidies and increasing programs to help people, and building new rehab facilities, building new centers for people to get help. It just doesn't ever seem to get to the point where it happens. It's always lots of talk.
Yeah.
We'll just talk about it. We'll get your votes because people want to see that it happens. And then, on the other side of addiction is the crime that comes with it, which I think is why there is such a stigma. But the amount of people that are committing crimes is this big. It's a drop in the ocean compared to the people who actually need help. Like this 84-year-old woman I met, she's never been a criminal. She was on Oxycontin. I don't know what they're called actually, so I'm calling it the wrong thing. The terrible name here that people in Australia, they call it hillbilly heroin. That's that's
We call it the same thing here.
oh good, okay.
Heroin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So but she told her story, that she had been in a really horrific car accident. So that was how she got onto this program. And then they stopped prescribing the pills.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was it. That's it. Just stopped. And so she had to
Mm-hmm.
go on to this program. I mean, that's terrible. You're doing these things, you're hurting people for no reason.
And that goes back to not explaining the medication they're being prescribed. So she probably had no idea. You're in this car accident, you have legitimate pain. What we're going to give you is highly addictive. You're going
Yeah.
to have to detox. And then, of course, they just stop it. She's in full blown withdrawal. So
Yeah.
now what?
When
Oh,
did
it's there.
when did it come out? They I actually watched something. I think there was a program on Netflix or Hulu about the is it Oxycontin or oxycodone?
Both. They make
Oh,
both.
they're
So
the
both
same.
are. Mhm.
There was a
They're
program, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see it? They were talking about the company where they started to sell it across the world, and doctors were getting paid money, especially in the United States, paid money for prescribing this particular drug. And they were trying to say, "Oh no, it's not addictive. It's the best thing you'll ever have."
I was just talking about this today in my class because my class was opiate use disorder training, and I was explaining how we got here. Because everyone is
Yeah.
like, oh my God, fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. How did we get here? And it started with this. Right around 2014, there was a woman who had pain and she went to the doctor. And he said, like every doctor, scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain level? And she said a 10. And he said, there's no possible way you have a level 10 pain for what you're here for. And I don't remember what she was there for. And she said, I do. And he goes, I'm not giving you pain medication. And he sent her home. She sued the doctor and won. So the medical board sent out an email and a letter that says, you're a medical professional. If your patient shows up and says they're in pain, you prescribe for pain. Their level of
Uh-huh.
pain is what they say it is, not what you think it is. If you don't do that, we will take your license. So suddenly you see oxy, roxy, Vicodin, because they don't want to lose their license. Then in Florida, we're a medical model. Everyone else, every other state is called a social model for addiction, which basically means medical model means you have a addiction, it's a disease, we give you a prescription. So all these little pill mills started popping up under that. Well, hey, if it's a disease, we can prescribe you oxycodone. We can do this, we can do that. So now you have people going, oh my goodness, my elbow hurts. It's a level 10. Can I get some oxy? So you've got 90 pills, 10 320s. Here you go. So next thing you
Uh-huh.
know, that person is banging 10 pills a day, totally addicted. And then the medical board goes, oh my goodness, we have a problem. We now have created a bunch of Oxycontin addicts. So what are we going to do? Well, okay, now, if you prescribe this drug, you're going to lose your license. So all these doctors stopped prescribing. Nobody had a plan. And you have all these people out there going, what do I do? I'm in precipitated withdrawal. You have people at legitimate jobs sitting at their desks going, what's happening? I have a headache. I have the shakes.
I think they're going to die.
Yeah. So now they're
Mm.
rushing around, what do I do? So then they end up in the methadone clinic. And now we have methadone clinics that don't have services for all these people because nobody planned for this. And the medical board had to know. I mean, they have to know. They're doctors. They know if you give somebody an opiate, take it away, this is going to happen. Oh, maybe we should be prepared. No, let's
Yeah.
just see what happens. So
Yeah.
now you've got people buying street drugs because they can't
Yeah.
get what they need. Now they get fentanyl, now they overdose, and now they're going, oh my goodness, how did we get here? Well, we kind of created this store.
Mm.
Going back to the overprescribing of the medication, and getting paid. And that's sort of what broke in the US about doctors getting paid to prescribe certain medication. It's like, wait a minute. Why does my doctor have a Porsche again? Well, this one gave him that, and this one gave him that. It's like, wait a minute. So he doesn't even know if I need that. He's just getting a kickback. So that was a whole other issue that came out. It's like, oh my God. And the industry
Yeah.
I'm in is already dirty and, kickback city. So it was just one more thing that was like, wow, just what we need.
Money.
Yeah.
Money makes
Yeah.
the world go around somehow. Somehow. I like talking to you about the addiction, because that is what you have the addictioncoachonline.com. That's one of your websites. But I also know that you're bringing out, or you've brought out, another book, and you have a whole other side to you. It's not all just about addictions and things like that. So you've been helping business owners and
Mhm.
coaching in that. So what do you call yourself, or what do they call you? You're a transformational coach? Is that what you're
Transformational.
doing now?
Yeah. So as I'm working with my clients that had addiction, it wasn't just addiction, because addiction isn't the problem, it's their solution to a problem. So I started doing the other stuff, like, what is your problem? And a lot of it was money and career, and they have all these hopes and dreams, but they're scared to do them. So I'm like, all right, let's launch a business. Let's launch a yoga studio. And I had one client come to me and he's like, all I want to do, and it was a guy, he said, I want to make baby yoga clothes. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, but I'm a guy and I don't do yoga. No one's going to take me seriously. And I'm like, your wife does yoga. They'll take her seriously. That's branded around her. And next thing you
Mm.
know, we created this line of yoga stuff that went gangbusters out of nowhere because that's where he put his energy. So I was really good at that. And I thought, if I'm good at this, let's see what happens. So I do this with company owners. I do this with people that are stuck. And I call it like an unpause your life. You're stuck somewhere. Let's unstick you and watch the wheel turn and see what happens. So it's a whole separate
Fantastic.
side of what I started doing. And I just kind of ended up falling into that.
And now you're balancing both things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't we all do this? Isn't this what we all do?
Yeah.
So, how old is that book? It's called The 7 Key Principles to Tap into the Wealth Inside You. Is that right?
That's right. I think it came out in 2019, right before the
Oh, so
pandemic.
it's not like brand new, but it's newer than the other I Married a Junkie.
I
Both of
married a
those
junkie
books
years
I
in
think
here.
I found on Amazon, so I'm
Yeah.
encouraging people to go and have a look at it. I'm waiting for my copy, actually. So
Let me know if you don't get it. I have extra here and I can send you one. Might take a
well,
little
thank
bit
you.
through customs, but I can send you.
Yeah, everything just seems to be taking a long time, and I found that with Amazon. I just talked about this with another guest of mine, that some of the books that are not available, I'm encouraging everybody, as much as I love to have a physical book, if it's possible to get an ebook, especially if it's only on Amazon, do that. In Australia, we have Booktopia. I haven't been able to find your book on there, and I don't know if it's because I'm using the ISBN to search for it or whatever. But I need to probably do a little bit more research and see if I can get it that way. But I ordered it through Amazon, and it cost me quite a bit for postage. It was like $43 for postage, because it's coming from the United States, and then they put an import duty on there because it's coming from Amazon. And in the end, I thought about just telling my friend, "Hey, buy this for me and send it to me," because it would be much cheaper.
Which one did you get? I'll send you the other one.
I Married a Junkie. That was the only
Okay.
one I actually knew about in the very beginning. So when I got the one sheet from my producer, I went and had a quick look, and I thought, I would like to read this before I talk to you. And
Mhm.
we had enough time sort of in between. We had I thought we had enough time, and now still it's now a month later, I think, from the original time we were supposed to talk, and I still don't have it. So
I'll just send you both. They'll probably get there quicker than Amazon. And we're slated to record it on audio next Saturday. We haven't
Oh,
done
you
the
are?
audio because everyone wanted me to hire a voice actor. And I'm like, I really want to do my own audio, but I cuss like a sailor. So everyone's like, well, you probably should tame that down. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I said to a friend of mine, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to add like some extra stuff that's not in the book, like some extra stories that we didn't do. And everyone's like, oh, you should do that. That's such a good idea. So we finally found someone to record us correctly in a booth, and he's coming on Saturday. So we're going to get it into an
Fantastic.
audio file.
I love doing audiobooks. I'm volunteering for a program in India for children who are visually impaired. So,
Oh,
reading
wow.
children's books for visually impaired children. And then I've just been invited now to do an audiobook for actually, it's a book that was out of print. It was printed back in 1995. And so I was invited to do that. It's also a children's book, which isn't at all where I thought I would go. I never thought that I would end up in that direction doing children's books. And I'm putting myself out there. I've actually auditioned now for totally on the opposite end of the scale, which was an erotic fiction novel. I just got to put yourself out there, I guess.
You know what? That with women, that is huge.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
whole genre, women are like, because they're not getting it at home. They're going to
that's
the
right.
audiobook section there. That's where it is.
And the audiobooks is great because they don't have to be holding on to a book. You can hear it in your headphones, listen to it in the car. However, I love audiobooks actually. It's one of my
Mhm.
favorite things. I love to have a physical book and I'll always opt for the physical book first, but sometimes that just isn't possible, and sometimes you just have to say, okay, I need to have the ebook or I need to have the audiobook, and I'll always gravitate toward the audiobook first. There's something about an audiobook that wraps you up a little bit more.
Mhm.
Only someone who's a true reader, I guess, will be hearing me say this and understand that yes, when you're reading a book, there's something about escapism and escaping into, maybe I have an addiction to books. But there's this escapism, it makes me feel good. But an audiobook is a whole other level. And if we were talking about so that people who were listening would understand, it's like graduating from one drug to a better drug, because there's a whole different level of emotion. There's so many other things that wrap you up and draw you in with an audiobook, and especially when the author reads it, which I know is not always possible, but to hear their voice,
Yeah.
100%, that's what I want. Yeah.
I did that with I'm a big Lee Child fan, and I'm a big James Patterson fan. And when he read his Jack Reacher, that's the first thing I bought. I'm like, I want to hear this. And it was like, that's the book you bought? I'm like, I love Patterson. Like, really? I mean, have you heard him? Like, he sounds like the old grandfather when he's reading. He just commands my attention. I'm like, I love that. So
Yes,
yeah, I
yeah,
get
and
it.
there are some that are really terrible. I've heard there. I will not deny that there are some really terrible audiobooks out there, and usually they get returned quite quickly because I'm not going to engage with it. But there are others that I just think, oh, I'm totally enveloped in this story, and the actor, if it's an actor that's doing it, they make all the difference. It's a make or break when it
Yeah.
comes to an audiobook. Absolutely. So I wish you good luck with that. I'll be looking for it anyway because I love everything. I want to hear it all twice, three times.
Well, I
But
think
I do like the physical book.
you'll like the audio because I'm a pretty big personality, and so is my husband. So when we talk, like we'll read the story, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm just going to talk, and then I'm going to go sidebar. By the way, this is what really happened, and then go into it, and people are really going to like that because it's like, oh wow, you're talking to me. You have my
Yes,
attention. It's you and I in the room, and no one else. Like we're having this coffee chat, which
I'm
is
sold.
yeah, how I like to hear it. Like I'm sitting there with you having coffee, and you're going, by the way, hang on, this is not what happened. This is really what happened. I'm there. I'm there. So
Well,
yeah.
see, when you're writing a book, and especially with I Married a Junkie, was that published through a publishing house, or did you self-publish that?
I self-published through a publishing house. So what I
Okay.
did was I called the guy that I was working with and I said, I'm not going to write this. I'm going to talk this and we're going to transcript it and then I'm going to write it. And he went, really? So I sat down and with my husband and we just banter. And when he called this, he said, I've never done this before. He goes, it's you talking and him talking. So in the book, we're going to have you talk for a page or two and then him talk. And the stories are completely different. So when you're reading it, you're like, okay, there. All right, wait a minute. Where are we now? What's going on over here? And it's like back and forth, back and forth. And right in the middle, the whole thing collides. And it's just like all of a sudden now we're a team. So you hear my story, you hear his story, and then you're hearing the story together. And he loved it. He's like, this is such a good idea because it's so different. So when we do the audio, it's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna be a little of this, and then boom. So it worked really well. And I really enjoyed doing it because it wasn't your traditional, okay, let me tell you what my husband did story. It was kind of like, here's what he did, and here's what I was doing. And here's why I did what I was doing. And oh, by the way, I have some childhood trauma coming in throughout the book, and people are like, I had no idea that was going on. I'm like, yeah. So
I like it. I will be looking forward to that then. I'll still read the book, but then I'll be looking forward to hearing it in voices. I just love it.
Yeah. Cool.
Really
Thank
looking
you.
forward to it. And the other one, so the other book, that's tell me what is the audience for that book, the 7 Ways book?
The 7 keys that's happened to inside wealth inside you is for anybody that wants to take their life to the next level. They feel stuck, or they go, you know what? I really want to start a company, but I'm scared, or I want to write a book, but what if people don't like it? And I talk in there about when I first went into private practice in my industry, I got hit with a lot of haters right out of the jump, just nasty. Calling me all kinds of names, the C word, the B word, the A word, you name it, from my peers. And I went, okay, I must be doing something right because I hit a nerve. So I just dialed that up and said, I'm going to come at you with everything I had. And the more I went out, the more they started to panic and the bigger it got. And then eventually it got quiet when they realized it's too much work to fight her. She is going to be in that space and she's going to do what she's going to do. I'm done. And they started tapping out. So I talk about that process. If you have something other people think is valuable, they're going to be very negative because they don't want you to be successful. They want you to be not successful because if you're successful, they have to raise the bar. They have to raise the bar to be around you. And I talk about that and how you have to overcome that process to get where you want to go with anything, a relationship, a job, a career, anything you want to do and how to do it. And it all starts with believing in yourself. Like the first chapter is called Eat Your Broccoli. And it talks about you can't eat fast food and optimal work at a brain level capacity if you're eating junk food. And if you're eating, fast food and bonbons or ice cream, you're not going to sit down and be the best version of yourself. You're going to be tired. You're going to be irritable. And at best, you might be working at 20% capacity. So it starts with taking care of yourself. Once you do that, then it's step 2. And you can't pour from an empty cup, which a lot of people do. They're like, well, I'll help you, and I'll help you, and I'll help you, and I'll help you. And then they sit down and they're like, oh, I'm too tired to do it for myself. So it has to start with me first. It's okay to be me first and then help everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sugar, actually, because we were talking about it already, sugar is highly addictive. I was watching a program, actually, was it Dr. Drew, maybe? I'm not sure. Someone said something about sugar is even more addictive and harder to come off than some of those hardcore drugs. We call them hardcore drugs, heroin, all those things. Sugar is so bad for your system. It just is wreaking havoc on your system. Does it do the same thing to your brain?
Sugar and heroin are almost the same chemical makeup, and that might have been my episode with Dr. Drew because I threw that in the mix with sugar. I said to him, sugar is a highly addictive drug, and this is before people started recognizing that how bad sugar is.
Yeah,
because it is. You eat some, you want more. So
it makes you feel good. That's that whole drug thing, isn't it? It makes you feel good. You get that good feeling from it, and that's why you want more.
That's it. So the serotonin boost goes up. Now you want more. The problem is it drops you like heroin. So you have the headache, you have the shakes a little bit, you have the nausea, you have the diarrhea. So you have mild symptomology of opiate withdrawal, and you have the pinging of the brain like cocaine. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And then once you're addicted to it, all you want is more. you know,
And
and
you keep
one
escalating it, I
month.
found. I was addicted to drinking Coke, and, like, it was bad. It was so, especially through all the shutdown, what else was I gonna do? You know,
Hmm.
I wasn't working all the time. They were screwing me around with my job, so I was at home all the time, and all I was doing was sitting around. I was eating chocolate and drinking Coke, and I put on a lot of weight. Like, I almost hit 300 pounds, and I just said, "I cannot do this," you know? So I actually gave it up. I just said, "No more Coke." That was the first thing I needed to do, and then work on cutting out the rest of the sugar. So I actually switched to sugar alcohols to help with cutting out that refined sugar, because the sugar alcohols, they don't absorb into your, but you just pass them straight through, which is good. I don't need to be absorbing all of that. But like natural sugar alcohol, so stevia is
Hmm.
is my sugarless sugar of choice. But it was difficult, and I did have that. So
Hmm.
actually, we're not all so different. I wanted to bring that up only because you can always find a common factor with somebody.
Hmm.
Try not to be so judgmental. I mean, that's one of the big messages that I like to drive home in my podcast, that we're not so different. It's really important that we try to be we have a little more empathy for people who are going through shit that maybe you don't have experience with. But you might be sitting at home drinking a Coke right now, listening to this and thinking about the deadbeat down the road who's on heroin, or the local crackhead, as some people would put it. But you're not that different.
So this is what I say. Everybody has a vice to something. So I have, when I was teaching today, I had 130 people on, therapists. Some in recovery, some had no idea, they're just a therapist. So the
Mm,
first question I asked is, who ate sugar? Okay, great. I said, on our lunch break, from here on out for the rest of the class, you're not going to have any sugar and you're not going to have any caffeine. And I had one woman, she wanted to stone me. She's like, why? 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 I'm not that. I'm not a junkie. I don't have a problem with sugar. I'm like, whoa, you hear yourself. You might have a problem being that defensive. She's, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not the problem. And I'm like, you might have a problem with sugar. So I had one woman, of course, she's like, well, listen, I'm keto. I'm not taking sugar. I don't do caffeine. I'm not like these people. So I just did this. I said, you have one of these. She goes, a phone? I said, yeah. You got Amazon Prime on there? She goes, of course. I said, I want you to go social media and Amazon Prime free and don't use this for anything but to make a phone call. And she
yeah.
goes, how do I text people? I said, you don't. Use your phone as a phone. She goes, well, what if I need to check my bank account? I'm like, check it online. Don't use your phone. She goes, I can't do that. But this is my lifeline. I'm like, you're addicted to your phone. Do you hear yourself?
And you hadn't
So
even done anything really. You were starting to make them think about the fact that they may not be able to use something that they've had as a vice. Yeah.
exactly. So I tell everybody, when you're judgmental, I guarantee you there's something you can't live without, that you're
Yeah.
addicted to, that you don't realize you're addicted to. If you've at least once gone, oh my God, where's my phone? Someone called my phone. Where did I leave it? And you've panicked, you're addicted to that phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm
So
absolutely not addicted to my phone. I can promise you that. In fact, I think it's one of the worst inventions anybody ever came up with. Give me a landline, and if you want to talk to me, call me on the landline. Even Zoom and things, I feel like I need a bit of a tech detox now and then.
yeah,
It seems like they control us way too much. I'm not addicted to the TV. I can totally live without it. I didn't even have a TV for a long time. Because I just feel like there are better things that I should be doing. And that's not to say that you're wasting your life if you do have a phone that you're addicted to. But I see my niece and my nephew who are always like tech neck, I call it.
yeah.
They're sitting there, they can't be without it.
Mm-hmm. And
Speaking of
that,
that, actually, oh, sorry, go on.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was thinking about something I read. You also talk to people about other addictions. It's not just drugs, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're talking about now. Porn addiction is something else that seems to be really prevalent, and I think that has been maybe since all the shutdowns, or has this been around for a long time?
It's been around forever, but with the shutdowns, all of your strippers and your prostitutes couldn't go to work. Work is
Uh-huh.
closed. So
Yeah.
you saw the advent of OnlyFans, right? The OF crowd. And OnlyFans wasn't necessarily designed for porn, it was for other things. But this group of
Okay.
people used it as a platform to offer their services, for lack of a better term. And everything from selling their sneakers to selling used deodorant, hair clips to straight out online
Wow.
porn became prevalent. So people that would frequent the strip club or hire a prostitute kind of went, okay, I can do this. And they
Ah,
started joining these memberships and engaging in this behavior. And then the problem is that's a very non intimate relationship, right?
yeah.
You're looking at someone on the screen, there's no touching, there's no, it's really no communication. So they start to associate that with a relationship. Now, the problem becomes it's not just a porn addiction. They don't know how to communicate now with other people. They don't know how to
Mm.
build actual relationships because the relationship is on the computer. And, one person can take their camera off and you don't even know who they are. So it becomes this very anonymous experience that when they go on a date, they don't know how to behave. They don't know how to act. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And then that can lead to other addictions. Now they take a drug or a drink to act in public, to be around people, to be comfortable, because they're so comfortable online, they're not comfortable in public. So that is a whole nother sector of how do we break that habit and get back to actually having communication.
Wow. Involved, isn't it? And I like the way that you seem to be approaching it. That I've because I have talked to another person. I'm not going to mention their name because I'm not actually publishing their episode. Because the initial intent was to talk about porn addiction
Mhm.
and how it can be treated medically. So they were wanting to talk about medical treatment for porn addiction. So they were talking about prescribing certain medications that would help people to make them sexually inactive. It would actually remove all of their sexual desires by prescribing this medication to them. And that would help then with their porn addiction. However, it took a wild turn. The conversation took a wild turn, and suddenly it was all about the church, and it was all from a religious perspective, which I find hard to associate the two things with each other. That I have no problem with people who want to seek out help from their religious institutions. I'm not religious myself. I want to see things more from a clinical sense because not everybody is going to believe the same thing. And there may be someone listening who says, "Hey, I need help with this, but I don't go to church." And I don't want to see it from a religious perspective because I don't believe in that. So maybe I don't have this issue.
I can tell you why that happened. So, as a clinician, right, I'm trained classically in drug and alcohol specific. Porn addiction, gaming, and gambling are considered process addictions, meaning I'm not taking an external substance to my body. My brain is producing its own serotonin chemical. So
Yeah.
when I play a video game, watch porn, or gamble, my brain's juice is going ding, 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 and it's not external.
Uh huh.
So with talk therapy, we go, well, how do we break that? That's really tough because if it's drug and alcohol, it's just simply stop doing cocaine. Start with that, step one. Step two, talk therapy. But in a process addiction, you're not putting anything in your body. So
To
therapists
stop.
get stuck and go, oh, where do I start with that? And they don't know what to do. So there's no training for that as a therapist. So you have to stop and go, what can I do differently? Okay, so I do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So I do porn addiction differently. It's behavioral. Your activity is behavioral. I look at it that way. You're getting something out of it. What are you getting out of it? And what else could you be doing to get that same feeling? So I treat it very clinically. But what you saw was a lot of therapists won't touch porn addiction. They won't touch sex addiction because it's taboo, it's uncomfortable. What do I do? So the
Yeah.
one group that will is the church. They say, yes, yes, come. We understand this. You need to be abstinent, deny the flesh. And they go that direction
Yeah.
because there's nothing on the market. There's not enough therapists to go, wait a minute, let's treat this clinically. this is clinically how we treat it. We don't have enough training programs for that. I actually released one for sex addiction coaching. And I hired two of the best girls in the country that do sex addiction coaching. One's a therapist, and one was in the industry. So she
Wow.
was, yeah. So it's a very different. She comes in and talks about the fetishes and fetish cycling and stuff that I'm like, whoa, I never even heard of that. What is that? So she's teaching me.
Wow.
I'm like, this is fascinating to me because I'm going, I didn't know guys actually did that. I knew from my therapy side, but they're still programmed to learn this. I'm like, where do I go to school to learn fetish cycling? And she just looks at me and she goes, I've been to school. I lived it. Let me teach you. So she's teaching me this stuff, and I'm just like, unbelievable, because we don't have a school for this. There's nowhere to go. So
Yeah.
I watched how they do it and what they taught me, and I started trying it, and I'm like, this is really good stuff. Really good tips and tricks they've given me on how to change the behavior on the process side.
Mm. Where can people find you? Obviously, you're very, very busy, but can people follow you online, Twitter or Facebook? I know you've got a Facebook page. I saw that this morning. Where else can they find you?
So on Twitter, I'm at the Addictions Co. because there weren't enough letters on Twitter for me to put my own name.
Yeah.
Instagram, Dr. underscore Cali underscore Estes. Facebook, I'm Dr. Cali Estes or Cali Estes. I'm pretty easy. And then
Okay.
TikTok, I'm Dr. Cali Estes. And my TikTok's a sugar talk. So I do all the quitting the sugar stuff on TikTok.
Oh, I'm gonna follow you there because it's still a process. It's not easy. It has not been easy. I haven't replaced the Coke with anything. But I still find that what is that?
Sparkling water. This is
I
what you're
love
going to
it.
do.
I
Get on
have it.
this.
Yeah.
Get off the Diet Coke.
I'm looking at one right now. It's sparkling water with a hint of grapefruit. It has no sugar.
That's what you
Um
want.
but
Start.
that's helping me not want the Coke. And
Mhm.
I had a mouthful. My partner had a Coke, and I had a mouthful, and actually it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever tasted, which I'm happy about. I'm really glad about that. So I'll follow you on TikTok. I'm new to TikTok, but I'm working on it. It's a process. The whole social media thing, like I have to just get with it a little bit. I'm 41. I find it difficult to embrace new things. I like my little bubble that I've been living in, but COVID taught me that I cannot rely on that bubble. So I'm breaking
Yeah.
out and I'm trying new things, and I'm happy about it. Well, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Cali Estes. I really appreciate you taking the time. I can see it's getting dark by you now, and it's dragging on into the morning with me, 9:37 here. So you must be, what is it now, 8 p.m.?
8 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope that people will go by. I'll put some links. I'll find you. I'll put links in the show notes, and people can visit you. There's plenty of resources online from you alone. I think I had about 30 tabs open at one stage of all the different,
Awesome.
you go down the rabbit hole and you start
Yeah.
clicking on other things. And I like that. I like that there is more information than just one page.
Hmm.
And some guests may only be, fledgling in their careers in certain things that they're doing. I like to give everyone a platform, but you've been around for a while. You've talked to a lot of people. You can show what you've done, and you've got a long list of things to show how you help people. And I've learned things even by talking to you. I'm glad that I knew some stuff, actually. Sometimes I feel like I have to talk shit, like like I just have to bullshit my way through it, and I didn't feel like I had to do that. I'm so glad that I've had some personal experience that, whilst talking to you, it made sense in my head, and
Hmm.
I knew then that I've not been sold up the garden path, and I've heard it now from someone who's had no influence whatsoever. So I have learned something, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.